Welcome to episode 8 of the HONESTea, where we pour out all of the honesty on trauma, on well-being, on prosperity, on I guess giving everyone a bit of a reality check if you need it. And my hope, my intention for this is always that in me sharing a bit of my story, a bit of what I know, that will encourage you to live your personal legend, to fulfill your hero's journey, and to become more of who you are. And so I think today's topic is so relevant to that, and it is so aligned with living out your hero's journey, and it is around claiming your gifts. And it's funny because I feel as though there's sort of this part of us that is afraid to proclaim and to say even that we are gifted, right? And then sometimes we think of people who are gifted as people who have had this kind of excellence that has been recognized by somebody else since they were small. So like child prodigies and all of those kinds of things. But what I want you to understand, if you don't know this, is that you are gifted. And in fact, I believe everybody has a gift. I've spoken of it a little bit throughout, this podcast series. And this is the last episode of season 1. And I think it's really important to talk about why are we afraid to claim our gifts? And I think our gifts come in different forms. So I think we are born with gifts. And quite often, if you think back to when you were younger, you can sort of see what your gifts were. And I've spoken a little bit about this before. For me, I recognize that I've wanted to utilize my voice since I was very young. I've always been, sort of stood up for my rights. I've always been quite vocal in class. I'm one of those people who got the report that said, if Auntie Angela would just shut up, but not shut up, be quiet. I was always being told to shush, right? So I always had a voice. I've always felt like I had a voice, and and that voice was dampened for a long time. But I also love to write. And so I've always been a communicator. I'm also really good at connecting people. I love to connect people. I'm the kind of person, and it's one of my traumas actually. What people would say is my toxic trait. One of my toxic traits is I'll invite everybody to everything, because I love to connect people, and because I have an abandonment wound. So I always feel like, I've always felt kind of, why wasn't I invited to things? So, it's one of my things. I always want to make sure everybody feels included. But we have gifts that, yes, we were born with, that we came in with. Sometimes they're generational, and that's what I want people to understand. We talk a lot about generational trauma, but we actually have generational gifts as well. Things that we've been gifted with that we can see generationally. And then we are also given gifts along the way. And, that's what I have, a book called The Gift. And I believe that I've been given gifts along the way, some of them through trauma, and some of them because, for example, I had an incredibly lucrative, corporate career, and that meant that I was able to utilize my speaking, my facilitating skills, all of those things, my leadership skills. I developed in a really sometimes helpful, sometimes not way, but I was able to see more of myself. Very skilled practitioner in terms of, service and sales and all of those things. And so what I'm saying is that you have a gift, and sometimes you recognize it from a really young age. Sometimes you recognize it as you go through life. It could be that people just, you started to create gift baskets, and suddenly people were saying, man, you're really good at that. You should do more of that. And you actually really enjoy it. And so you do it. Now, sometimes you're good at things, and then you're sort of like, I'm good at it, but it's not what I love, you know? Like, I'm actually really good at cooking. I feel like I'm quite a good cook. I can cook anything from nothing, and that's because I came from, my living week to week and not having a lot. So it means I can cook, food 83 ways. I think I've said that before. And also, I'm really good at putting together like charcuterie platters, like that whole kind of thing. I have because I'm a creative, and so that's a really easy thing for me to do. And like I did a really massive one for my husband's 40th, which people loved, and they started to say, Anne, could you do this? You could do this for a living. You'd be really great at it. Can you do it for me? And the truth is, I could, I just don't want to, right? It's a labor of love when I'm doing it for people I love. Same with cooking, but it's not something I want to do. It doesn't fill my soul. It doesn't make me excited. So I'm saying there are things that you are gifted with, and it's your gift that you want to give the world. There are things that you're gifted with that you're given along the way. It also fills your soul and it feels good. Also amazing. There are other things that you get along the way that you become really good at and you're maybe gifted at, but maybe it doesn't feel like, but I might do it when I love you, or when I feel like the energy to do it, when it feels an aligned action is another thing that we'll talk about in the next series. But it's not necessarily your thing, you know what I mean? So that's the first thing, is that I want to let you know you have a gift or gifts. Some you've been born with, some you've accumulated along the way, and some you may still. A lot of times I know I get inspiration, after prayer or meditation or whatever, or quietness or presence or journaling, and then I suddenly realize, I'm actually quite good at this. I haven't tried it before, but I'll get out of my comfort zone, and I feel like, I'm quite good at it. And I know for a lot of people that I work with, same situation, we'll start to lean into something. It feels a bit clunky, it feels a bit awkward, but suddenly they're really great at it. And they realize, oh my gosh, I actually really love this. It's not something I've ever explored before, but I really love it. And they become quite gifted at it, right? And so I think that is the place I want to hold. And what I also want to talk about is why we're so afraid to say that we are gifted, that we're really good at something. And in corporate space, right? There are so many, and if we're talking about inequity in corporate arenas, and that can be in terms of gender, that can be race inequity, that can be, sexual orientation, like all of those things, right? There are unconscious biases that exist, absolutely proven that they do exist. Conscious and unconscious bias exists, particularly in the workplace. And there are a lot of people, because generationally, because maybe they've had to heal to become that way. But there are inequities, and we know that a lot of men, because they have come from generations where they haven't had to hold back their talent or their gifts, they actually step into them unapologetically. They will step into roles and they will say, I'm actually really fantastic leader. I'm great at this part of my job. I know that, and I do it really well. And then there are a lot of us who are afraid to say, and even in job interviews, even on our own resumes, we won't say what we're amazing at. And we have this kind of, and particularly I think in marginalized communities and groups, where we feel as though we're told to be humble, and we're told that, to speak of yourself in such a way it means that you're egotistical. And if you haven't seen my podcast earlier on ego, then I would love for you to go and listen to that, because you'll understand that the ego is not just about the superior, it's also about the inferior. And the inferior part of our ego is the part that says, no, don't say you can do all of that, because maybe you can't, because Maybe you're not as gifted as you think. But what I really want to talk about is, why don't we claim our gifts? Why can't we stand in authority and say, I'm actually a really talented speaker. I'm a fantastic writer. I'm great at connecting people. I am a natural born leader. I am really great at coming up with ideas. I'm fantastic at automation. I'm really great at processes and being process driven. And at the same time, there are things that, one of the greatest things about owning your gifts and what you know and what you're great at is when you do that, when you have this power behind you and you're like, I know what I'm great at. I also know what I'm not great at, right? So, I know that I am not, all of those things I described, I'm not good at processes. I'm not, it doesn't light up my fire to go out and look for business, for example, as an entrepreneur. It's not something that I'm great at, I can be really, I don't like small talk, I really want to get to the point really quickly. So, if you ever work for me, and if you've ever worked for me, you would know, I just want to get to the point, I can hold space for people, absolutely. Since I was very young, I've been one of those people that people will stop me in the supermarket and tell me their life story, people I don't know. I've always been that person. I've always had people share their life stories with me. And I'm very patient in that space. But if you work with me in business, you'll know. If you know anything about DISC, I'm an ID, so which is I'm very direct, and I want to get to the point, and I love you, but I really want to get to the point. That's kind of where I sit. So I know I have weaknesses from that perspective. I don't like administration. I don't like processes. I don't like filling out reports. I don't like anything that's kind of feels monotonous to me. And I sometimes, to understand, if I feel as though there's a part of a process I don't understand, I will ask a lot of questions to understand and to get where I have a full understanding of something. And sometimes I know that can be frustrating for people. And I recognize that even very early on in my career, I recognized that I could be. So someone would send me an email and I would reply very directly because that's just my personality. And I had to actually stop myself and put nice things in at the beginning and the ends of emails, just so that, people don't think I'm too, because I think somebody said to me, a mentor of mine very early on in my career, hey, you're so direct. But sometimes some people need a good morning or a have a fantastic weekend kind of situation, or I give a shit, which I absolutely do. I just wasn't putting it in my emails. And so one of the blessings of owning who you are, of owning your gifts, and look, I will, if you've followed along, you will know I'm really just owning my gifts now. I've kind of always been aware of them and I've utilized them in the workspace, but I haven't gone out in public and said, man, I own this gift. And I know that's because there's so much of me that has been afraid to speak my truth. One, because, I was shamed for sharing my truth in the beginning. So that was a trauma, getting that shame from my family. But two, because we are taught, right, to be humble and not to speak our truth, and not to say that we have these incredible gifts when we do. And there are some gifts that are really accepted and some that are not. And other people are allowed to say you're gifted, but you're not, which is just crazy. And the thing about it, when you own these gifts, is you can also recognize the things you're not good at. One of the things I tell the people that I work with, and a lot of them are entrepreneurs, is to say, or leaders, and that's a whole nother podcast, that you are a leader. You are a leader. And that's a whole nother podcast that I'll talk about. Whether you're leading people or not, you're absolutely a leader. But a lot of people in where they are hiring other people, I always say hire your weakness. And when you recognize your gifts, it's easy for you to accept that you have weaknesses. I used to work for a woman many years ago who was a self-made millionaire twice over. She lost everything and then she had to rebuild. And one of the things that she used to say is, oh, I don't need to know everything, Ange, because that's why I have you. You're really good at whatever it was, which I was facilitating for her at the time. And I was also in leadership, right? I was facilitating for a whole lot of managers, and she was like, well, that's why I've got you, because you're really good at speaking, you're really good at facilitating, I'm just running the business. And that was my kind of first insight into the fact that we don't need to know how to do everything, and that everybody gets to lean into their own gifts. And so even when I'm hiring, I'm thinking about, what is it that you have that's amazing that I'm not great at, that I want to lean into your gifts, and I want to help you to grow your gifts and to do what you love every day. And and that's the other thing, is that not only for you but for the people in your life, to say, what are you really good at? What fills your soul? What makes your heart sing? What makes you feel good about going to work every day? And I think I've mentioned this before, but like, for me, I feel like real success is not having to work, because I believe everybody needs to have a purpose, and I believe everybody gets to serve the world in their very own special and unique way. But it's working in a way that doesn't feel like work, because it feels like you're just utilizing your gifts, your talents, what makes your heart sing and fills your soul. Like I said, it's all of the things, And the other thing I want to say is that sometimes when we're afraid to say it, right? Because other people can't hold the vision of what you have for you. So, if I share about my podcast, for example, there are some people who are going to be like, oh my God, that's so amazing. I love that for you, and I'm going to support you. And then they show up and listen every week. There are some people who would say, that is so amazing, I love that for you. They're not going to show up. A lot of times people, especially people who love us and our friends and family, they struggle to hold the vision, right? They can't see your vision because it's your vision. God, universe, source, your creator gave you your vision for you, gave you your gifts for you. Sometimes you're the only one who can see your gift. Sometimes you're the only one that can see your vision. And that's because it was given to you. It wasn't given to your family. It wasn't given to your friends, right? It wasn't given to everyone else. It was given to you. So don't feel offended when you share your gifts and people don't show up for you. That's happened a lot for me on this podcast. I'm like, people that I think are going to show up for me don't. And actually, I learned that a while back when I first started my business. People who I thought would be like, oh my God, I so support you and I love you and I appreciate you and I think that's amazing, didn't show up. And so your gifts, your vision for who you are, for how you show up, that's just for you. And if you continue on, this is my encouragement to you, is for you to just continue on. Be faithful in the fact that what you're doing matters. Know that you were given this gift that feels good to you, that feels like alignment, that feels like you're supposed to be doing it, that doesn't feel like work when you're doing it. And just keep doing it. Keep showing up in whatever way that looks, whatever capacity that is, however that looks for you. It doesn't have to be a podcast. You know, we're not all coaches. We don't all use our voice. For me, it is. And the reason why I'm using my voice is so you will find yours. You will find your melody, your tune, your beautiful place in the world that is just for you, that is unique to you, that you'll be able to show up, you know, in your place of honesty, in your place of authenticity, and just lean into that. Lean into that space, because that, in that space, you may, you know, and look like you're going to have to be brave. You may need to be brave. In fact, you almost definitely will, because anything that is worth anything means that, yes, you're going to have to step out. You're going to have to keep going when your family says, why are you doing that? Why don't you just do what you've always done? Aren't you just happy where you are? And only you know the answer to that. Are you happy where you are? Yeah, well, maybe you're okay. But maybe you know there's more. And I believe you do know there's more. And I believe that you want to find the more, you know? And if you don't know what it is either yet, if you don't even know what your gifts are yet, that's okay too. You know, create the space to give yourself the opportunity to understand what it is. And, you know, sometimes when you start to act, things reveal themselves to you. Things reveal themselves to you as you start to act. So, you know, you can find peace and find quiet and lean into more, you know, ask yourself, what is it that I actually really love and I really enjoy? And everybody's going to have their own unique thing. And like I said, even if you're like me, right? And you might work with you might be a coach around whatever it is. But even coaches who are like me, you know, who work in trauma and who work in, you know, authenticity and elevation and all of those things, are still not doing it exactly like me, right? There's no other Ange. There's no one else who's singing my exact melody, using my exact instrument, doing it in the same way as me. And I think I've said before, you know, when you're in a choir, you might all be in the alto section, but every voice in the alto section is slightly different and brings their own tonality. And that is the beauty. That is the beauty. You don't have to be like anyone else to sing in the choir to create impact. Your voice alone creates impact. Your melody, your tune, whatever fills your soul creates impact. So I know I always go on. You know why? Because I am so fucking passionate about this shit. I just am, you know, and it cracks me up. Every time I swear, I'm like, oh my God, Ange. Like, honestly, because I do have corporate clients as well. So sometimes I'm like, oh man, don't watch that. I promise not to swear in the workspace. But it's just who I am, because uniquely, that's what I do, you know. That's who I am, and then I'm not going to apologize for that. You know, that's who I am, and so I want people to be unapologetically themselves. And as I wind up this season of the HONESTea, and it's our first season, which I am incredibly proud of. It took so many years of thinking about it before I got that final, you know, universal nudge. It happened to come from a friend of mine, but honestly, it could have come anyway, and you know, I sort of want to talk about that as well, the signs. But to finally push me over the edge and force me to do something, and then I had to step out in faith and make that happen. And now I pretty much daily, I will have somebody say to me, hey, I've been listening to your podcast, and I'm always blown away. Even if it's just one episode they've listened to or whatever, it always blows my mind. I'm like, what? People are actually listening to my stuff? Like, who's even doing that? That's crazy. It means so much to me that I'm using my gift and I'm putting it out in the world and people are listening and resonating with it. That means so much to me. And you can have this too. You can have this feeling of alignment, of feeling good about what you do, of showing up in the world and creating something from who you are, from your gifts. Claim your gifts. Be unashamed to claim your gifts. It not only does it help you, it collectively means that you're in a much happier, energy and vibration. And it means that when you're so secure in yourself that you're claiming your gifts and you're saying, this is who I am in the world, this is who I am, and I love my gifts and I appreciate them and I'm sharing them, whatever they are, it also means that you can show up for everyone else and their gifts and support them and love them. And how amazing is that? How amazing that not only are you going to have your gifts, but you're going to be able to support other people because you feel so good about what you're doing. It makes it easy to support other people and what they're doing. It makes it so easy, and it makes it so easy for you to go, you know what, I'm so great at that, and I'm not great at this. And I love you for what you are great at. And I don't have to be great at everything. I could be great at lots of things, absolutely. But maybe I'm not, and that's all okay because we're all different. We're all unique. We all have things, And that's what makes you amazing. That's what makes you incredible. And so I'm going to leave you. So this is the end of season 1. We will be back in just a couple of weeks with season 2, which I am so excited about. And I was going to reveal what it's all about, but I think I'm going to save that and put that out just before we go live, which is in just a couple of weeks. If you haven't, I would love it if you would catch up on what we've been doing so far. So catch up on the episodes that you haven't seen. Share the love, share it with anyone you feel like needs to hear this. I'm not big on promoting what I do, but I do feel like, the way that we love and support one another and lift one another up is that we share it and we like and we subscribe and all of those things. And I try to do that for everyone in my life. And so this is me being brave and saying, can you please subscribe, support, comment, all of the things on my platforms, on my, buy the gift, because I think man, I believe my intention for the gifts is that it will change people's lives, as it is for this podcast. And I will leave you, as always, with my final thought, which is that my prayer, my intention, my gift to you is that you will go out now and you will heal deeply and lead boldly and live fully. And as always, this is brought to you with just so much appreciation and all of the love. I love you and I appreciate you more than you would ever know. Thank you for joining me for a bit of reality check and at the HONESTea. Mwah.